What if I told you that the pain you feel in your life is not the problem? The knot in your stomach, the heaviness in your chest, the guilt or shame you carry, they are not your truth. They are the story your past self tells you so that you can survive. They are the unconscious aspects of your personality that you repress or hide. It's your shadow that you keep in the dark while it silently steals your power away. Welcome back to Unbox the Podcast. I'm Sahar Huneidi Palmer, and today we're talking about the shadow, the parts of ourselves that we judged, rejected, or hid away. The shadow isn't necessarily our bad aspects. They can also be the positive aspects that we didn't embrace or bother to develop. But here's the thing. Unless you face it, the shadow shows up in your body and in your emotions. It makes the story feel so real that you believe it all over again. And unless you act differently today, you're only propagating it. So, in this episode, we'll unbox how the shadow shows up, how emotions enforce your old beliefs, and what you can do to loosen its grip. The shadow isn't a monster. It's simply the part of you that you pushed aside in order to cope with the current situation. Maybe you buried anger because it wasn't safe to express it. Or maybe you carried the belief, I'm not good enough, I don't deserve this, because you were compared to a sibling. Or maybe no matter what I do, I never get a lucky break. That's a common one. These parts do not disappear. They sit in our unconscious and they keep running the show. Looking back at years of studying holistic therapy, the first year assignments were really interesting. They were what I call doable self-discovery exercises. What you think of yourself, compare that to what people think of you, etc. But the second year assignments is where I got stuck. We got deeper. And one time I was pacing up and down our small flat in London when my late husband noticed my anxiety and asked, "What is it?" I told him that I can't seem to find the answer to this question. Name 10 flaws, faults, or negative aspects of your personality. He shrugged his shoulders and stood up and said, "I can't see any," and walked away. Clever man, I thought. But it's true. He left me all alone to face my dark side, because only I can do that. That was the hardest thing to do because the shadow is often very well hidden. Sometimes you can spot the shadow because it's like a one major story or the main wound that you unconsciously identify with, and it colors your mindset and how you conduct your life. But the problem is that this grows as you grow up. But that's not all, because as you grow, other smaller parts gather around the main wound like a constellation. And you wear it unconsciously like an accolade because it conveniently justifies why you're not living the life that you wish for. Facing our shadow is essential. I just finished the manuscript for an upcoming book, the Zen Oracle. It's a joint collab with my old friend from London, Khaled Bazzi. And it's based on a set of symbols that we developed more than 30 years ago when we started seeking guidance. In this book, we dedicated a whole deck to exploring the dark or unconscious aspect of the self. The shadow is one of the 44 symbols included because it reminds us that this part of us is not evil, it is not permanent, and it is certainly not who we really are. It is simply a coping mechanism, a script that you created in the past to help you get through life, and you forgot to revisit it and update the story. So, how does the shadow feel real? Your body and emotions become the stage where the shadow story plays out. A tight chest convinces you, I am not safe. A heavy head repeats, I can't cope. A wave of guilt whispers, I must have done something wrong. Your body's symptoms are not the problem. Your body is simply the vehicle through which emotions express themselves as they run the old script. The emotions then enforce the old belief, and together they make the shadow story feel so real. I once worked with a client who felt constantly exhausted and demotivated. She told herself, I must be ill. There is something wrong with me. Yet all her medical tests were really within the normal range. Her exhaustion wasn't illness, it was her shadow story of neglect. She had spent years looking after everyone's need in her family while ignoring her own. The resentment and the fatigue were her body and emotions reinforcing what she felt, that she was unsupported, and that transpired as being unwell. All these symptoms made her feel really special, unconsciously attracting attention. But it wasn't her truth. It was her unmet shadow expressing what was pent up inside. Let's talk about the shortcut trap. When pain shows up, it tempts us to take a shortcut, to suppress it, to distract ourselves. Worst of all, it forces us to self diagnose. So we look things up on the internet and we convince ourselves further that we found it, we found our case. So we place labels on ourselves, our lack of skills, and on our lack of abilities. We justify why we can't come out of the box because of this story or that wound. And the story continues to play out while we suffer. But these shortcuts don't heal. They keep the shadow alive. Healing doesn't have to be over a long process. Sometimes a small mental shift in perspective, what I call a sidestep, can trigger the healing. The moment you acknowledge the shadow, its grip loosens. You realize this is just an old story, not who I am. The body softens, the emotions shift, and the mind begins to release this old script. And here's the key. The shadow dissolves not through force, but through kindness. Being loving to yourself is the antidote. Losing the labels, asking yourself, is this true? Is this really true? This is when self-discovery begins. So take a moment to pause and ask yourself, what story has my shadow been performing lately? What emotions are enforcing that belief? Write your answers down. Name your story. Name your shadow. And instantly, it will loosen its grip. Many of my clients think they know themselves really well, and they avoid or resist journaling until the brain sees what's on their mind. The shift actually happens. I think these intimate conversations with ourselves are truly important because you do your own self-discovery and there's no one watching to judge you, but you uncover this wound, you uncover the shadow, and it begins to heal. However, accountability and action are what we must pay attention to. Because awareness alone is not enough. Unless you act differently, you're only propagating the same old loop. This is where accountability comes in. Choose one action today that contradicts the shadow story. If your story says, I'm not safe, take one step that proves you are. If your story says, I must carry this alone, start asking for help. And I want to share something that one of my mentors told me when I first started out. He said, face the light, and the shadow always falls behind you. The wisdom stayed with me for decades. You don't need to fight the shadow. You don't need huge psychoanalysis to get there and uncover it. You don't need to wrestle with it. You simply need to turn towards the truth of the real you, your true self. Move into the light, shine the light on the shadow if you like, and it will naturally start to lose its power. So remember, the shadow self is just a story, an old story. The body acts it out, emotions express and enforce it, the mind believes it, but you can change it. By recognizing it, by being kind to yourself, and taking a different action, a different response, the real you is not a shadow. You will find out that the real you is the one who faces the light and walks free. Thank you for tuning into episode 37 of Unbox the Podcast. If what you heard today touched you, please remember to follow and subscribe now. And if you would like to go deeper, download my free tool, How to Identify Your Body's Pain and Heal It. It will help you understand the story that your body is storing, the emotions that you've been carrying, and it will guide you back to the real you. I'll leave the link in the show notes. Until next week, you can rewrite your story and reclaim your power.